truth? Bring it on!
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Do you want the whole truth?
I don't think you're ready.
Governments don't control things. A government can't control the economy without controlling people.
It's Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. Here comes truth.
Well, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Glad you're here, right here on the AFR Talk Network. Happy Friday to you. It's jam-packed, and I want to start it right now. If it's Friday, nothing but truth. It's Beat the Press. Chris Woodward, the real Woodward, joins us, the environmental and business reporter for One News Now, onenewsnow.com, American Family News. Chris, great to have you back.
Thank you. Good to have you. Good to be back.
Let's jump right in here, okay? The AP is doing a report on an Ohio school lunch program, and this is the report. And I just wanted to get your evaluation. I mean, you're the business reporter. You understand how these things work, government programs. You know the relationship between the two. Mm-hmm. But here, I just want to know if we're getting the whole story. Did the AP, the Associated Press, do its job? Roll it.
School cafeterias in Boston are dishing out something new this year. Free lunches for all public school students regardless of need. It's part of a growing federal program that has spread to 10 states and the District of Columbia.
That in prior years, this was an area where many students would come to school. At times they wouldn't come with a lunch, and they would just sit while they were watching others eat.
Besides easing hunger, school officials say the program means less time and paperwork for students who qualify for free or reduced lunches. It also takes away the stigma for those needing the help.
Having free meals, at least every child has the opportunity, the equal opportunity, to have a lunch together with their peers.
The district's director of food and nutrition says by serving free breakfast and lunch, students are guaranteed 2 meals a day, and families can save nearly $800 per year.
Yeah, and it kind of makes for a more complete day, especially with schools that are beginning to extend learning time.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture program will be available nationwide to qualifying schools in 2014.
Now, that was Beantown, not in Massachusetts, not the great state of Ohio. But that aside, Chris, I sit back and I think to myself, well, why don't we all just get free lunches? I mean, it's free and it helps everybody.
Well, my first comment would be families are not saving X amount of dollars per month or year or whatever statistic she threw out there because someone is paying this. And I hate to say this phrase because everybody throws it out there, but really there is no such thing as a free lunch or, in this case, breakfast and lunch.
And so in that report, I mean, this is not an anomaly. And this is what we talk about. Some people would say Crane Durham talks about it ad nauseum, but I would say we're pointing it out for a reason, and we're drawing a distinction between the likes of what you do at One News Now and American Family News, onenewsnow.com, and what the other press, Associated Press, is doing. That seemed to me like a propaganda piece. That seemed to me, as what you just said, not referencing another point of view of where this money's coming from.
Mm-hmm. It was at minimum one-sided. They certainly could have gone to some conservative or quote-unquote nonpartisan think tanks, maybe even Independent Women's Forum. They've done a number of things in the way of school lunches and just the culture of alarmism that we have out there, just to get the other side of the story out there. Certainly there are moms out there that would have given the other side of the story if they would have just gone to them and gotten their reaction.
Well, that is the if, and it's the frustrating part of things because we are left with one side, and people are turning on the news and they say, hey, that's great. Mm-hmm. And at 16 trillion plus in the hole, I think we need to start addressing these things. I know it's just nibbling around the edges relatively because we've got to go to entitlements, but bottom line, as a business reporter, you're seeing this type of trend. I mean, would you call it a trend in this type of reporting?
It is a trend. I mean, we do see this, and not just in AP stories, but which One News Now does carry AP reports. But we certainly see it in other publications as well. And you know, just from an environmental standpoint, we have stories about how people in this world don't have enough food to eat and whatever else. You have to ask yourself the question with this effort, how much food is being thrown away?
That's another reason. And that's why I would have instituted, if I ever get in power, the Clean Plate Club rule. But that's another story for another day. I kid. I jest. But I'm not jesting about clip 41, which is actually the clip I need right now. And it is ABC, newsbusters.org hit this a little while back, but it's worth a check because we heard a lot about the fast food protests, minimum wage, raise the minimum wage. And we all can relate to people in the workforce, whether they be 3% of the workforce or not, that we want people to earn as much as they can, and we don't want people in poverty. And certainly that's an argument that, hey, this is going to, we need to hit that. You know, we need to absolutely make sure that we keep people out of poverty, and the very best way to do that. And clip 41, tell me when it's ready. It should be okay. And so, Chris, what I'm saying is, well, you're about to hear a report from ABC News, and they're talking to some people, but they're also relating it to the MLK protest. And this was the link that a lot of people picked up on, including myself, pointing out, hey, they're linking the idea of racial oppression with economic oppression. And it's ready? All right, roll it.
This is what protest organizers want you to see if you visit a fast food restaurant today. This morning, with financial backing from the Service Employees International Union, they say fast food workers at 1,000 restaurants in 50 cities across the country will walk out of work and onto picket lines like this today.
Wall Street is recovering, McDonald's is recovering, and yet everyday workers are not.
The day-long event comes on the heels of the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. NAACP President Benjamin Jealous tells ABC News he hopes workers will be inspired.
Let us also go forward from here and lift that minimum wage.
So, Chris, when you hear this and the linking and the interviewing of people and saying, hey, people are recovering, but we don't really get the other side of the story when it comes to the minimum wage.
Well, first things first, it's debatable whether or not Wall Street as a whole really is recovering. I mean, Dan the Man talks about that every day from the
Great
point
point
in which he begins his program and goes off the air, and the other publications that he has. As far as the minimum wage goes, again, you could have interviewed someone to talk about, hey, what happens when the minimum wage goes up as far as other things, milk prices, gas prices, clothing, whatever. And there have been a number of people I've talked to, certainly, that have pointed out, look, we certainly sympathize with some of these individuals. They're adults. They lost their jobs in this terrible economy. But pushing a McDonald's, for instance, to pay you $15 an hour could actually jeopardize your job. They might just replace you with a computer that a customer simply walks up to and, punches in their order.
With the leaving out the rest of the story and again, picking up on the automation impact. See, we have to deal with the results of policies. And if you dress something up and say, hey, free lunches, it's great. Who's going to argue with free lunches?
Right.
But as you said,
who's going to argue with a higher minimum wage? I mean, that's generally the idea.
Absolutely. Because if you do, you're kind of greedy and you're heartless and you just don't get it. But what you do get is the result of that, Milton Friedman style. And as you know, there are consequences to the policies that you cover, business, environmental. I mean, you're dealing with cap and trade and a whole host of things. One of those is Obamacare.
Right.
And this week there was a report released by the Kaiser Foundation discussing the raise in premiums. What did you think about that report?
Well, Kaiser is known for this. They are usually labeled as nonpartisan. Certainly you might look at some of the organizations that they work with, or maybe even pitch in some money to, and get a feel on really where they stand. A number of people have thrown out studies like this saying, hey, Obamacare is helping to do this, it's easing that or whatnot. Ovik Roy, obviously a guest you've had on before, I've talked to him. He's just one of the people that are kind of giving, the other side here. In this instance, Ovik says that premiums really are still about 24% higher than they were before. Even in New York, there was a study a couple of weeks ago about how New York premiums were going way down, but New York was one of the states with the highest premiums. So even if they were going down, they're merely coming back down to a level where some other people are already paying. And again, that's the rest of the story and the comparisons between what the CBO predicted rather than pre-Obama rates, pre-Obamacare rates. And by the way, I'm mentioning Obamacare. He's embraced it. The president has. It's not about hate or anything along those lines. A lot of people get mixed up. I know Tingles is listening, and that would be Chris Matthews, and he gets all dusted up about it. Yeah, he told me he listened.
I can tell because he's got a lot of anger. And, sometimes I look at Chris Matthews and I go, I do not want to become that. And very bright guy, don't get me wrong. But I digress. Let's keep moving, and let's go to the jobs report today. Okay. Little sideline here, but I am really excited, Chris, because 7.3%.
Yes.
Obamanomics is working. What's left in that story? Because the idea, hey, 7.3 lower unemployment, this is the trend we want. We're getting there. 7.5, 7.4, 7.3.
Well, if we're getting there because more and more people continue to stop looking for work. And that is the reason, or one of the reasons cited, really, today for the drop in the unemployment rate. We added 169,000 jobs, private sector jobs, if you believe the government's numbers. But that's below predictions from ADP, which come out the day before, and generally those are off a little bit. But even economists were predicting somewhere in the 180,000 range. So while the headlines will say government adds X amount of jobs but unemployment falls, you really need to look at the details that are out there.
You really do. And part of looking at the details is certainly we can shift over to the issue of Syria and the details there, the details about the opposition. Who are they? We're going to cover that a little later with Lieutenant Colonel Gordon Kukulu. But right now I want to focus in on the press coverage of it. And here's Andrea Mitchell teeing up, and I believe this is now cut 3. So everybody on the same sheet there. I'm going back to cut number 3 with Andrea Mitchell of MSNBC and NBC. She sits on the panel on Meet the Press. Oh, how far it's fallen. Bring back Tim Russert's legacy. Wow. So here is Andrea Mitchell discussing the Iraq War, and she characterizes Iraq being responsible for now the division and the upset over Syria because we were lied to. Her words. Roll it.
I don't want to relitigate Iraq, but the blunt fact is that some of the questions that were asked, Congressman Vargas asked both Kerry and Hagel yesterday, are you lying? Because we were lied to about weapons of mass destruction. There is such a credibility gap between the White House and Congress, the leftover, the hangover from the Iraq War. So can you be at least a little sympathetic to what the administration is encountering now with Congress in explaining the intelligence and getting people to believe it?
Okay. To knowingly mislead somebody. Okay, general definition of lie. She's using lie. The intelligence was wrong. It was off. But that's different than lying about it. That would mean that you knew it was off and you went ahead anyway and you presented it as truth. There's no evidence to support that. In fact, a Senate bipartisan panel cleared the Bush administration of that, putting pressure on people that were the intelligence gatherers for a specific result. So tell me something, Chris. When is it appropriate for a journalist to use lie?
Certainly not in that instance that Andrea Mitchell was in. I mean, you can go to any search engine and type in Andrea Mitchell, and really the first couple of things that'll pop up will say Andrea Mitchell lied. So that's one part of the story. But and unless you're talking to that individual and maybe they knowingly lie to you or they throw out some numbers and you can say, well, that doesn't gel with the numbers I have here. Some folks may not believe you. Maybe if you keep pressuring them, but certainly in that instance where somebody is not there to defend themselves, that's purely her opinion. And quite frankly, MSNBC is chock full of opinions. MRC did a study not too long ago showing that MSNBC was actually more opinion versus news content than most of the other networks.
And not surprising. It's interesting. It's one-sided opinion so often, which is troubling in so many ways. That said, we're not going to play the clip because people have heard it, and it's regarding the red line. And people are saying the president said there was a red line, and now he's saying, no, he wasn't saying it was his red line. It was the world's red line. Your thoughts on that? I mean, on that coverage of that, because David Letterman said he's full of bunny stew, in essence.
He did definitely say the words red line in at least one press conference. I could not find that information today, but I remember watching a press conference.
You're right.
In which he did use the words red line. So one could make the argument that you, sir, did set a red line by bringing up said red line.
And then again, it goes far enough to say, is it a policy change? Is he lying? What did he really mean? And I get in there. I'm not comfortable with saying the president lied. I've said it on one major issue, and that was Benghazi. That all said, I know that you are comfortable with being responsible, and that's why you're so good at what you do. One News Now, onenewsnow.com. Hey, Twitter. What's your Twitter?
It is at AFNC Woodward. And let me say thank you to Wendell and the other folks that actually hit me up on Twitter afterwards the last time that I was on your show.
Say it again.
You got a good following. At AFNC Woodward.
Well, people are digging the segment, and I know why. Because you're just that good. Thank you for taking the time. And now, wow, you're really laying. No, I mean, he's just a good guy. And American Family News is full of them because you are blessed with that at the top of every hour. Go to One News Now, onenewsnow.com. Jody Brown, every morning I get the headlines. It's a beautiful thing. Chris Woodward, thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Take care. All right, coming up next, our good friend Seton Motley from Less Government. Now, we're going to get to Syria at the bottom of the hour, but I do want to discuss something about the internet. And do you know net neutrality and what it's going to do and the impact it's going to have? You know how healthcare is messing up job growth and costs? Well, are we going to wait for that to happen? Seton Motley will explain Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. Happy Friday, AFR Talk.